Doug, today is the 4-year anniversary of the 2021 winter storm, as you know, when millions of Texans were left without power for several days. I think ERCOT estimated more than 100 hours we were below freezing. And the state estimates at least 246 people died as a result. So energy consultant and author of the Texas Energy and Power newsletter, Doug Lewin, joins us now to discuss what's happened since the deadly winter storm and what still needs to happen to avoid another disaster. Welcome, Doug. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Sure. And so, Doug, what improvements have been made since 2021 to increase grid reliability?
Yeah, so I think the biggest change, actually, Jenni, is that we have added 44,000 megawatts of power. So to put that in perspective, and that's sort of what's called nameplate capacity, right? So you don't always actually get that much amount of power, but that's the full capacity. So at the time of Winter Storm Uri, we had about 125,000 megawatts. We're now up to somewhere around 170,000. So that's a major, major change. That is not really because any policy change since then. It's really technology advancing and costs dropping, particularly for solar and storage, which make up 75% of that 44,000. So that's a huge change, makes a big difference, obviously, to have that greater supply on the grid. I think it's also important to recognize that the PUC, the Public Utility Commission of Texas, did pass a winterization standard for power plants, and ERCOT is now enforcing that. ERCOT visits power plants. Every power plant gets a visit at least once every 3 years, more if they find a problem. And that does look from the data like it's having an impact. We have seen less thermal power plant outages, thermal meaning gas, coal, and nuclear, during the extreme cold snaps we've had the last couple years. Obviously, Uri was colder, but if you look at the one we had December 2022 called Elliott, compared to January 2024 or just last month, January 2025, the temperatures were in sort of the same ballpark roughly, and the outages were much, much less in the last two than in the December 2022. So those are a couple of changes that have been made. Still some changes that are needed, but those are a couple of bright spots.
And you're leading us right to my next question. What still needs to be addressed, Doug?
Yeah, I think number one, we really have to get a handle on demand. We need to reduce the energy waste that's in the system. I'm actually looking at the ERCOT dashboard for next week on February 20th. They are predicting right now, forecasting an 81,000 megawatt peak. That is a very, very high number. And that's with temperatures that are going to be, not any lower than like the mid-teens in most of the state, even low 20s in part of the state. So a lot of that is being driven by very, very inefficient heat. We have about 3 million homes in Texas that are being heated literally by the same technology that's in a hair dryer or a toaster oven, but sized for an entire home or apartment. Those use massive amounts of power and drive that winter peak up to levels where we don't have enough supply to meet it, even with all the added supply that we have. I know I said 170,000, but that's nameplate. You don't actually ever get that much production from any source, whether it's gas or coal or wind or solar. They all produce less than at their nameplate. So that's one, energy efficiency. We've really got to get the energy waste out of the system. The other big one is winterization of the natural gas supply system. That was one of the main problems during Winter Storm Uri, is that there was a lot of freeze-offs happening, particularly in the Permian Basin, but also in the Eagle Ford Shale in South Texas. And that led to a lot less gas flowing. So there were cases where power plants were operational. They didn't freeze, but they were unable to get gas. And that was absolutely part of the crisis. The data shows from these winter storms over the last few years that there really has not been an improvement there compared to Winter Storm Uri. So that's another area that needs attention.
What about transmission lines? Don't we need to shore up our infrastructure as well?
We do. So there is a bright spot there in the sense that the commission very quickly after Winter Storm Uri moved to approve a major transmission project to South Texas. It was like a $1.2 billion project. It is under construction. They are trying to speed that towards the conclusion, but it's going to take another 2 or 3 years. But now there's a much bigger plan on the table. ERCOT has, through its stakeholder process, through the analysis it does, through it was something called the long-term system assessment and the regional transmission plan, they have really kind of come to this conclusion that we really need to get some extra high voltage transmission lines. These would be 765 kilovolts. We don't have any lines at that level. Ohio and some other places around the US and a lot, China's building a lot of it, but we do not have any in Texas yet. That would be a major leap forward for us. Would allow us to move a lot more power around the state, a lot more reliably. But that has not been approved yet. And even after it's approved, it's going to take at least 6 to 7 years.
All right, now let's bring in Senate Bill 6. Can you please explain how the regulatory changes in this bill will help with grid reliability?
Well, so I would say the bill that was filed the other day is most likely a starting point, and it's going to change a lot. There are some requirements in there. I would say the bill, the concrete requirements that are proposed in the bill are more about how we pay for transmission than it is necessarily about reliability, more about affordability, particularly for residential and small commercial consumers, than it is about reliability. And we could talk about that if you want, but there are provisions of that bill that would require the PUC and ERCOT to do some studies and maybe require large loads to bring power with them to the grid, to have backup power on site at the data centers, where if the grid were in trouble, say it's a winter morning and we're at one of those 80,000 plus mornings, like it looks like we might be next week, then they could sort of like remove their load from the grid, power themselves with the backup generation that they have on site, so that the rest of the state has that power. But that's not a requirement in the bill. It's really kind of an idea that's been floated, and we'll see if that really kind of picks up. I would say for reliability, the bigger things are they going to fund the rest of the Texas Energy Fund, which has 1.8 billion in there for what are called backup power packages at hospitals, nursing homes, police stations, water treatment facilities, et cetera. That would be a major change both for reliability and resiliency if that funding were actually in the budget. And the House and Senate both have it in their opening budget. So hopeful on that one.
So, okay. And finally, Doug, do you think, speaking of next week, that the grid will hold up once the temperatures dip? I think we have 3 days of below freezing temperatures.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like right now, and obviously these projections and forecasts change a lot. But February 20th looks like, at least according to ERCOT at this point, and maybe it's just because they don't have the next day on their 6-day view. So maybe February 21st will be, I haven't dived into the numbers yet, but just from the quick glance at the dashboard, an 81,000 megawatt peak, that would shatter the recorded record, right? We don't know how much we needed during Winter Storm Uri. So I always put that asterisk, right? It was probable that our demand during Winter Storm Uri was somewhere around 90,000 megawatts. But as far as a time when we've actually been able to record it, the highest it's ever been in the winter is 78,500. They're looking at 81,000 next week. So that's a significant peak. We could see some problems associated with that. It's going to depend on, is there precipitation associated with it? How high does demand actually get? How much of the gas fields are knocked out by freezing issues? How many of those thermal power plants go offline for freezing issues, and what is the renewable output? Those are the 4 factors you're looking at. As of right now, I would say it's a low probability there would be outages, and if there were outages, they wouldn't last very long. But again, I haven't dived all the way into the data yet, so I'm a little hesitant to say much more until I pull up all the spreadsheets and.
Sure, but it sounds like you're saying there's not going to be a repeat of 2021 and the other times that we've also.
I mean, to have a repeat of 2021. First of all, so the average statewide temperature was 6. The average statewide low temperature was 6. Well, I don't think we're looking at. I've not opened my weather app today, but when I opened it last night, it wasn't looking at anything like that. Yeah. So that's an important difference. And again, even if we were to have 6 degrees as the average statewide low, I think we would be better off than during Uri, but there likely would be rolling outages. But I don't think that they would affect 10 million people, and I don't think they would last for days. ERCOT itself projects that if we had Winter Storm Uri conditions, there's a 60 to 70% chance that there would be rolling outages. They think that during Winter Storm Uri, demand would be 97,000 megawatts. If the dashboard were showing 97,000 megawatts, I would be telling you we're likely to have outages next week. And that is, again, why the energy efficiency piece is so important, because we just can't get to a place where we need 97,000 megawatts even before all these data centers have come online, right? We've got to do something to address that side of the equation. But no, it doesn't look like it's going to be cold enough that we would reach those kinds of levels.
Well, that makes me feel a lot better. All right. Doug Lewin, thank you so much for your time. Did I forget anything else about SB6 that you'd like to add at this point?
Well, I mean, the big change there, and this is a little bit wonky, but like the big change there is that there's a change in the way that the transmission costs are allocated. So really large users can actually avoid their transmission costs by avoiding their peak during the summertime. The biggest change in that bill, in my mind, is it actually changes that to their if you're a large user, you're a factory, whatever your peak demand is, regardless of when the peak demand on the system is, you'll have a minimum transmission charge based on that. So what they're really trying to do here is say, we can't have a world where data centers are coming to the grid and interconnecting and avoiding their transmission charge. And I think that likely is a positive change. But I think that bill is going to change so much before it's done, because I think there's a lot more that's going to need to be done on that front. But that's really what that bill is about, is how do we divvy up the costs for transmission, particularly given the large investments that are needed going forward.
Continue with us and watch free now on the KVUE Plus app everywhere you stream.